What if I told you that stupidity isn't about being less intelligent, but about something far more dangerous? A mental surrender that can turn even the smartest people into followers of falsehoods without them realizing it. This is the terrifying theory of stupidity you were never meant to hear. And once you understand it, you'll start seeing it everywhere. In politics, in social media, even in your own daily decisions. We'll break down why our minds take mental shortcuts, why we follow the crowd, and why we believe lies even when the truth is right in front of us. As you listen, I want you to notice which parts hit uncomfortably close to home, because that's where the real work begins. If you're ready to protect your own mind and think more clearly than the world expects you to, make sure you subscribe right now. Drop a quick "I'm awake" in the comments so I know you're here and ready to resist. Most people think stupidity comes from not being smart enough, but that belief hides a more unsettling truth. Stupidity often has nothing to do with low IQ. It emerges when a person, no matter how intelligent or educated, stops engaging their own independent thought. Daniel Kahneman, the Nobel Prize-winning psychologist, showed us that in every human mind there are two systems at work. System 1 is fast, intuitive, almost automatic. The part of you that can catch a falling glass without thinking, recognize a friend's face in a crowd, or sense danger before your conscious mind catches up. System 2 is slower, more deliberate, and demands energy. The part you call on to solve a complex problem, plan a long-term goal, or carefully weigh evidence before making a choice. The danger Kahneman warns about is that System 1 often dominates, even in situations where careful, logical analysis is crucial. Under stress, in moments of urgency, or when surrounded by strong opinions, System 1 jumps in with snap judgments and confident answers, while System 2 quietly steps aside. This is how a brilliant scientist can believe a misleading claim without checking the data. How a skilled professional can make a decision that contradicts their own values. How you might find yourself supporting an idea that, deep down, doesn't feel right. It's not a lack of intelligence. It's the quiet surrender of the mental clarity you need to think clearly. This pattern echoes something Dietrich Bonhoeffer observed during Nazi Germany. The most dangerous form of stupidity lives inside bright minds that have stopped thinking independently. It's not an inability to understand. It's the choice, conscious or not, to hand over that responsibility to others. When that happens, people stop asking, "Why am I afraid to question?" and start letting the crowd answer for them. In that moment, truth is no longer decided by evidence, but by repetition, authority, and the comfort of agreement. Think about a time you've been under intense social pressure. Maybe during a workplace crisis when everyone supported a decision you knew was flawed, or during a heated online debate where it felt safer to stay silent than to challenge the majority. In those moments, the pull to follow the crowd can be stronger than the desire to be right, and it feels easier to conform than to risk being isolated. This is exactly how the illusion of agreement forms. Once you stop engaging System 2, your sense of self-awareness narrows, and you become more likely to believe lies, simply because they are repeated often enough. In a world where mass manipulation is a daily reality, through political slogans, sensational headlines, or algorithm-driven news feeds, the stakes are even higher. System 1 feeds on the emotional hooks in these messages, while System 2, which could question and slow down the reaction, is left unused. The result is functional stupidity. Decisions that feel certain in the moment, but are rooted in unchecked bias, misinformation, and the comforting rhythm of consensus. And the scariest part? You may not notice it happening because it doesn't feel like surrender. It feels like belonging. Understanding this dynamic opens a new path. It's not enough to know how intelligence works. You need to see how easily it can be bypassed when emotional pressure, social conformity, and mental shortcuts take over. Every time you let System 1 run unchallenged in situations that require deeper reasoning, you make it harder to break free from the cycle. But the opposite is also true. Each time you pause, question, and activate your slower, more deliberate thinking, you reclaim the independence that keeps you from slipping into the crowd's automatic momentum. It's not about never making mistakes. Mistakes are inevitable and, at times, necessary for growth. It's about protecting the one ability you cannot afford to lose, the ability to think for yourself when the pressure to conform is loud, when the comfort of going along feels tempting, and when the price of silence is far greater than the discomfort of speaking up. In those moments, the real danger is not that you'll be wrong, but that you'll stop asking if you might be. And once you stop asking, you stop choosing. You drift, not because someone takes your mind from you, but because you quietly set it down. That surrender is at the heart of what Daniel Kahneman describes when he says we are cognitive misers. Your brain is constantly calculating how to save effort, and in doing so, it favors shortcuts, what psychologists call heuristics. These shortcuts can be helpful for survival, but they also create blind spots so wide you don't realize you're stepping into them. When faced with complexity, your mind instinctively looks for the quickest path to an answer, not necessarily the most accurate one. Two of the most powerful mental shortcuts are confirmation bias and availability bias. Confirmation bias makes you seek and trust only the information that supports what you already believe, even if that belief is flawed. Availability bias makes you give more weight to information that's easy to remember or vivid, even when it's incomplete or misleading. Together, they create a mental filter that doesn't just color how you see the world. It decides which parts of reality you even notice. Leon Festinger's theory of cognitive dissonance reveals how deeply this runs. When reality collides with your existing beliefs, your brain doesn't naturally rush to adjust the belief to match the evidence. Instead, it often bends the evidence to protect the belief. Why? Because changing your mind costs energy, and admitting you are wrong can feel like a threat to your identity. It's far easier to distort the facts than to dismantle the parts of yourself that are built on them. Picture someone convinced that a certain vaccine is dangerous. They encounter overwhelming scientific evidence proving its safety, yet they dismiss or ignore it. Why? Because engaging with that evidence would require System 2, the slow, deliberate part of the mind, to take over, and System 2 demands focus, effort, and discomfort. Instead, they search for stories, anecdotes, and headlines that align with their fears, surrounding themselves with a sense of validation. It's a sense of ease, but it's the ease of a closed loop, not the clarity of truth. This is functional stupidity, not the absence of mental ability, but the strategic avoidance of using it. It works well in the sense that it shields you from internal conflict and the exhaustion of confronting complexity. It spares you the anxiety of uncertainty and the strain of wrestling with nuance. In the short term, it can even make you feel safer and more certain. But the cost is steep. You trade accuracy for comfort, autonomy for alignment, and truth for the illusion of stability. In a modern world overflowing with information, functional stupidity is seductive because it feels efficient. It allows you to scroll, react, and decide without pausing to test the foundations of your conclusions. Yet each time you take that shortcut, you reinforce the habit of letting System 1 drive while System 2 sleeps. Over time, this becomes your default mode, a reflexive way of thinking that isn't thinking at all. And by the time you realize what's happening, you may already be far downstream, swept into the current of the crowd. Your steps matching theirs, your voice echoing their words, and your decisions no longer fully your own. You won't remember the moment you stopped steering, because it didn't feel like a decision at all. It felt like safety. It felt like belonging. But that's the trap. The comfort of agreement can be the quietest way to lose the independence you didn't know you were surrendering. Daniel Kahneman reminds us that human decisions don't exist in a vacuum. They are constantly shaped and often warped by the environment around us. Your thinking isn't just influenced by what you know. It's also molded by who you are standing next to, whose approval you fear losing, and whose authority you trust without question. Social pressure is invisible until you try to resist it, and by then, it's already doing its work. Two classic experiments reveal just how deeply this force runs. In the 1950s, Solomon Asch showed that 75% of participants would give an obviously wrong answer to a simple question, simply because the rest of the group gave that same wrong answer. It wasn't because they suddenly couldn't see the truth. It was because disagreeing with the group felt more dangerous than being wrong. A few years later, Stanley Milgram's obedience study found that 65% of ordinary people would deliver what they believed were potentially lethal electric shocks to another person, just because an authority figure told them to continue. They weren't cruel by nature. They were ordinary, intelligent individuals, swept into actions they would never have considered on their own. Kahneman's insights fit seamlessly alongside these findings. When System 1 is in control under social pressure, it seeks the path of least resistance, conforming to the group or obeying authority without slowing down to let System 2 question the logic or morality behind the action. Psychologists call this externalizing your thinking, outsourcing both judgment and responsibility to someone else. The immediate payoff is psychological relief. You no longer carry the burden of uncertainty because the group or the authority has already decided for you. But the long-term cost is the erosion of your own capacity to decide at all. The most dangerous part of this process is how right it can feel. When a false idea is wrapped in the warmth of consensus or delivered with the confidence of authority, it stops feeling false. You no longer think of yourself as someone going along. You think of yourself as someone doing the right thing. That's how entire communities can rally behind harmful policies, how professionals can enforce unethical rules, and how nations can drift into moral catastrophe without the majority ever realizing it in time. History gives us chilling reminders. The Salem witch trials weren't driven by villains, but by neighbors who genuinely believed they were protecting their community. Genocides have been fueled not just by tyrants, but by ordinary citizens convinced they were serving a greater good. Even financial bubbles, which seem purely economic, are often built on the same social dynamics. The unwillingness to question the crowd when the crowd is certain. This is why Kahneman's theory, combined with the work of Asch and Milgram, paints such a sobering picture. Stupidity in this form is rarely an isolated flaw in an individual. It's a collective state, nurtured and legitimized by the very environment in which it thrives. Once it takes root in a group, it becomes self-reinforcing. Every person who conforms makes it harder for the next person to resist, until dissent feels almost impossible. And here is the quiet danger. When the crowd moves, it carries you whether you intended to follow or not. The current doesn't ask for your consent. It only asks that you stop swimming against it. The moment you do, you're no longer deciding. You're being carried, and the longer you float, the more natural it feels. The real question isn't whether you're strong enough to stand apart. It's whether you'll notice you need to before the river has already taken you too far. Because once the river has carried you far enough, the shoreline you could have reached is no longer visible, and the idea of swimming against it feels less like freedom and more like drowning. And this is where another force quietly steps in to take control. Your emotions. Daniel Kahneman warns us that System 1, our fast, intuitive mode of thinking, runs on emotional fuel. It reacts before you have the chance to reason, and when strong emotions take the wheel, System 2, your slow, deliberate thinking, is not just ignored, it's effectively unplugged. You've felt this before. Anger rises in your chest, fear sharpens your senses, excitement pushes you forward, and suddenly the thought of slowing down to analyze feels unnatural, even frustrating. This is why you might read a sensational headline on social media and share it instantly without checking the facts. Because in that moment, your brain isn't asking, "Is this true?" It's asking, "How does this make me feel?" And if the feeling is strong enough, that's all it needs to decide. Kahneman calls this vulnerability the affect heuristic, the mental shortcut where your emotional state shapes your perception of truth. If something aligns with your current mood, outrage, hope, pride, fear, you're far more likely to believe it, even if the evidence is thin or non-existent. This isn't just theory. It's been demonstrated in human behavior over and over. Philip Zimbardo's Stanford prison experiment revealed how quickly emotions triggered by a situation, in this case, the intoxicating sense of power for the guards and the helplessness for the prisoners, can override personal morals. People who, under normal circumstances, would never humiliate or harm others began to act cruelly because the emotional pull of their assigned roles overpowered their rational judgment. The connection to Kahneman's work is direct. When System 1 is fueled by strong emotion, it doesn't just make quick decisions. It locks the door on System 2. Reason becomes a passenger tied to the back seat, watching helplessly as emotion speeds through every red light. And while this can be useful in moments of real danger, where quick action saves lives, in the complex world we live in today, it's more often a liability than a strength. Think about the last time you acted on impulse. A text you sent out of frustration, a purchase you regretted, a post you later deleted. The speed of the decision probably felt natural, even necessary, in that moment. But later, when the emotional fog lifted, you could see the flaws clearly. This gap between how a choice feels in the moment and how it looks in hindsight is exactly where emotional manipulation thrives. In politics, advertising, even personal relationships. And here's the uncomfortable truth. The people who want to influence you already know this. They understand that if they can make you feel strongly enough, they don't need to win your logical agreement. They just need to bypass it. Outrage campaigns, fear-based headlines, and inspirational but misleading stories all work because they plug directly into the emotional current that powers System 1, leaving System 2 idle. The danger isn't just in making one bad choice, it's in letting emotion become your default decision-maker. Over time, you begin to trust the rush of feeling more than the slow weight of evidence. You start to confuse being moved with being right, and just like the current of the crowd, the pull of unchecked emotion can take you further than you intended, to places you didn't choose, and sometimes to places you can't easily return from. This is why Kahneman's warning matters. It's not about cutting emotion out of your life. That would strip away what makes you human. It's about recognizing when emotion has shifted from being your compass to being your blindfold. Because the moment you can see that shift is the moment you can take the wheel back, even if the road ahead feels slower and harder. And that choice, the one to pause, to think, to reclaim the driver's seat, is where real freedom begins. Because freedom isn't just about breaking chains you can see. It's about resisting the invisible strings that pull at your mind without your consent. In a world where those strings are woven into the very systems you use every day, awareness becomes both your compass and your shield. Daniel Kahneman explains something called the availability bias, our brain's tendency to favor information that's easy to recall over information that's accurate. On the surface, it seems harmless. In reality, it's the perfect weakness for modern systems to exploit. The media, advertising, politics, and social platforms have all learned to feed you not what's true, but what sticks. Sensational headlines dominate your newsfeed because they spark strong emotions, outrage, shock, joy, fear. And emotions drive engagement. Engagement drives clicks. Clicks drive profit. The more your emotions are provoked, the longer you stay, the more you share, and the deeper the system understands exactly how to keep you coming back. Politicians have mastered the same game. Complex policies are hard to sell. They require thought, patience, and nuance. But a short, emotionally charged slogan slips into memory effortlessly. Make America great again. Yes, we can. Take back control. These phrases bypass analysis and lodge themselves in your mental shorthand. You don't stop to ask, what exactly does this mean? Because it already feels like it means something important. Robert Cialdini, in Influence, shows how principles like authority, social proof, and scarcity are used to bend decision-making without you noticing. When a message comes from someone you see as credible, when it appears everyone believes it, or when you think the chance to act will soon disappear, you're less likely to stop and question. The bias toward what's easy to recall, combined with these psychological triggers, creates a shortcut so seamless you don't even realize you've taken it. This is where Kahneman's functional stupidity thrives. It's not the kind of stupidity that trips you up in daily life. It's the kind that works within the system, the kind that keeps the gears turning smoothly, at your expense. The loop is simple but dangerous. Systems create content designed to provoke System 1's fast, emotional thinking. You react emotionally. That reaction generates data. The system uses that data to refine its ability to trigger you again, harder, faster, and more precisely. Each turn of the loop makes the content more addictive and your thinking less deliberate. What's most insidious is that it feels good. You're entertained, validated, and sometimes even inspired. But you're also being guided into patterns of thought and feeling that serve someone else's goals. You begin to confuse what's memorable with what's meaningful, and over time, the muscle of deep, independent thought begins to atrophy. This is why the stupidity Kahneman warns about isn't accidental. It's profitable. The more you rely on quick emotional reactions, the less likely you are to demand accuracy, complexity, or truth. And when an entire population operates this way, misinformation spreads faster, polarization deepens, and collective reasoning collapses into a tug-of-war between opposing emotional tribes. But once you see the architecture of this system, once you recognize that what grabs your attention isn't always what deserves it, you can choose differently. You can slow down, ask harder questions, and resist the urge to share or believe something just because it's easy to remember or feels good in the moment. The current is strong, yes, but the decision to paddle against it, even a little, begins the process of taking your mind back. Because every time you pause before reacting, you weaken the loop. And every time you demand truth over memorability, you remind the system and yourself that you are not here to be led blindly, but to see clearly. Because clarity isn't something that arrives by accident. It's something you cultivate deliberately in a world built to distract you. Daniel Kahneman calls this the art of activating System 2, the slower, more deliberate mode of thinking that resists the pull of fast, emotional reactions. It's not glamorous, it's not easy. But it's the only way to step outside the loop that feeds on your automatic impulses. The first move is deceptively simple. Pause. When you encounter something that sparks an immediate emotional reaction, anger, excitement, fear, resist the urge to click, share, or respond right away. Even a few seconds of stillness creates the mental space to shift from reaction to reflection. Next, verify the source. Don't just check if a claim sounds plausible. Look for at least one independent source that confirms it. The act of seeking out verification slows your thinking and forces you to leave the emotional bubble created by the initial message. Then, think in reverse. Ask yourself, if this were false, what would the evidence look like? This simple reversal destabilizes the illusion of certainty and primes your mind to look for counter-evidence instead of clinging to the comfort of what feels right. Psychologists call this intellectual humility, the ability to admit you might be wrong and actively seek out opposing viewpoints. It's not weakness, it's a form of mental vaccination against functional stupidity. When you deliberately expose yourself to perspectives that challenge you, you strengthen your immunity to manipulation. The problem is, System 1 will always protest. It will whisper that you don't have time, that you already know enough, that questioning is unnecessary. This is why breaking the loop feels like swimming against the current. Not because the current is malicious, but because it's constant. And yet, every deliberate pause is a small act of rebellion. Every fact check is a reminder that your mind belongs to you. Every time you invite the discomfort of being wrong, you reclaim the right to be right on your own terms. Over time, these habits become less like defenses and more like instincts. The very act of slowing down starts to feel natural. You begin to notice the manipulative rhythms in headlines, speeches, and algorithms. You recognize when a claim is designed to provoke rather than inform. And slowly, you stop being an easy target. Kahneman's work makes it clear, the system won't change for you, but you can change how you meet the system. The more you choose slow thinking over fast reactions, the more resistant you become to the psychological shortcuts that turn intelligent people into predictable pawns. It's not about doubting everything. It's about earning the right to believe something. And that right is only won through the discipline of slowing down, verifying, and questioning, even when it's inconvenient, even when it feels like swimming upstream. Because in a world that profits from your speed, your slowness becomes a kind of power, and in that power, you find the only freedom worth having, the freedom to think fully, clearly, and for yourself. But freedom of thought is not a gift you receive once. It's a discipline you must practice every day, especially when the world makes it easier to surrender it. Daniel Kahneman, alongside many other great minds in psychology, reminds us that the greatest threat is not ignorance, but the quiet surrender of our own intellect when truth becomes inconvenient, costly, or uncomfortable. It's not that the information isn't out there, it's that we stop reaching for it when the effort feels too heavy. Dietrich Bonhoeffer once posed a question that still pierces through time. Who stands firm when all else falls? The answer has never been obvious because history shows that most people don't. Stanley Milgram's obedience experiments revealed that the majority will follow orders even when they know they are inflicting harm. Solomon Asch's conformity studies showed that most will agree with an obviously wrong answer just to avoid standing apart. Kahneman's conclusion cuts deep. The human mind instinctively looks for the path of least cognitive resistance. We choose the mental shortcut, the comforting lie, the quick agreement, not because we are evil, but because it's easier. And unless there is a conscious, deliberate will to resist, we will all take that path eventually. This is why stupidity, as unsettling as it sounds, is not a fixed trait belonging to other people. It's a state, a mode of mind, that anyone can slip into when they stop engaging the slow, effortful processes of thought. You don't escape it once and for all. You guard against it daily. The guardrails are simple in theory, difficult in practice. Cultivate slow thinking, embrace intellectual humility, and remain willing to face the discomfort of truth. That discomfort is not your enemy. It's proof you're alive to the reality before you, not numbed by the easy consensus of the crowd. Yes, it takes courage. The courage to pause when you want to react. The courage to say, I might be wrong, when your pride aches for certainty. The courage to seek out the perspective you disagree with most and to sit with it long enough to understand it. And courage, in this context, is not loud or dramatic. It's quiet, consistent, and stubborn. It's the invisible decision, repeated hundreds of times, to remain awake in a world that rewards sleepwalking. Because the truth is, no one can think for you, and no one can take the burden or the privilege of thinking away from you unless you hand it over. Every day you're given that choice, to let the current carry you, or to keep swimming toward clarity. In the end, the terrifying theory of stupidity is not meant to shame you. It's meant to warn you, and warnings are useless unless they lead to action. So let this be your reminder. Keep thinking, even when it's slow, even when it's tiring, even when it's lonely. Especially then. For it is only in the act of thinking, truly thinking, that you protect the one freedom. No system, no authority, no crowd can rightfully claim the freedom of your own mind. In the end, Daniel Kahneman's work leaves us with a clear truth. The greatest threat to our freedom is not ignorance, but the quiet surrender of our ability to think. We've seen how functional stupidity hides in plain sight, in groupthink, in the pull of emotional manipulation tactics, in the mental shortcuts that feel safe but strip away self-awareness. We've explored how conformity and the psychology of obedience can slowly erode independent thinking, until our choices are no longer truly our own. If there is one practice you can start today, it is this: slow down. Before you decide, before you react, before you share. Pause for 3 breaths and ask, am I thinking or just following? This moment of stillness is where critical thinking in modern society begins. It's how you turn the tide from overthinking versus reacting, from mental slavery psychology to conscious self-awareness. The lesson is simple yet demanding. Freedom of mind requires effort. Kahneman showed us that System 1 will always push for speed, but wisdom lives in the patience of System 2. Every pause is a choice. Every choice is a step toward reclaiming your ability to see clearly, act deliberately, and live on your own terms. Now, I'd love to hear from you. Share in the comments a moment when you noticed yourself breaking free from the crowd's current. Your story might be the insight someone else needs. And if this message has stirred something in you, subscribe to join a community dedicated to deep thinking, self-awareness, psychology, and the courage to challenge the easy path. Because the most radical act in a world built on speed is still this: to stop and think.